comfortable with you. I feel like so comfortable with you. I feel like so comfortable with you. I feel like I'll always love you. I'll always love you. Always.
What an unbelievable weekend in the National Hockey League. What an unbelievably bad weekend in boxing. And what a week ahead in hockey, basketball, and the UFC. It is a busy time, and Couch Potato Diary is here to break it all down live right now. Welcome, everyone, to Couch Potato Diary. My name is Peter Klein. Thank you very much for hanging out today. As always, we are presented by Sea of Dead. Check out seaofdead403.ca for that great Calgary swag. We got Cannon. These Cannons hats have been sold out, but some great other Calgary stuff on there and some really cool stuff on the way. So keep it locked on seaofdead403.ca for all those ways to rep this city, and lock onto our social medias as well, because some good content coming out there. Also, if you need the energy to get through a gaming stream or to just sit through one of mine, you can check out Swift Energy. Go to swiftenergy.gg. Use the code PKPrimetime for that 25% off. So, like I said, this is a wild time in sports, just an unbelievable weekend in the National Hockey League. We will get to that. We'll get to some NBA, what we saw from the weekend, what we could see ahead as we preview all the series that are still to come. We'll get into the boxing and just how horrendous that weekend was, even though we had some big names. And then it is UFC 315. We're going to be looking at our Fight Night first look at UFC 315, plus looking at some of the CanCon on there, as the Canadian spotlight is shining brightly this weekend out in Montreal. So we'll look at the Canadian fighters that are going to be making their way into the octagon. Plus, we have a little bit of Calgary Flames talk for y'all as well here today. So that is what's going on. As always, we are live on youtube.com/@CouchPotatoDiary, twitch.tv/primetimepk, and kick.com/primetimepk. If you're watching on any of those, if you could just let me know how the stream is going, that would be greatly appreciated. So let's dive right in now and start our conversation with a classic all-timer weekend from the National Hockey League. The Winnipeg Jets were choke artists until they weren't, as they come away with a thrilling victory in Game 7 of the Stanley Cup playoffs, moving on to the second round in just an absolutely fantastic night. There's no other way to put it. This one, and look, obviously, this segment was going to be a lot different today when there was 2 seconds left on the clock in the third period. But Cole Perfetti gets the deflection, and then Adam Lowry gets another deflection in the second overtime, giving the Winnipeg Jets the biggest win, easily, of Jets 2.0 and a ticket into the second round. But just an unbelievable night to start things off. And, like, you get all of the drama of it right away. The game starts and Hellebuyck is shaky again, and he is not able to make some big saves when the team needs it. And it felt like a nervous building. It felt like a nervous hockey team. It did not seem like a President's Trophy winner or anything like that. It felt like a team that was struggle bussing, and quite frankly, a team that had quit. And we had talked before about how this team has quit at various different points. And that it looked like that was going to be the case again coming up on Sunday night. But then they're able to battle back. A perfect deflection from Perfetti gives them a bit of life at 2-1. And then another goal is scored and it's 3-1. And it is just that air out of the balloon again. But then desperation sets in with under 2 minutes to go, and they are able to come back and tie this game up. Just absolutely incredible to come back from down by 2 with 3 minutes left, down by 1 with 2 seconds left. It was phenomenal. And the cherry on top of all of it is that they do this without Scheifele and without Morrissey. It's incredible. Like, Morrissey gets banged up very early on in that contest, and that kind of sets the team back a little bit. And all of a sudden now, Pionk is playing 40 minutes and earning that new contract that he got and silencing a lot of doubters out there. So a gigantic credit to Winnipeg for being able to battle through this and getting these opportunities. And just thinking about that last play in regulation really does, I think, summarize what this game was for the Jets. The puck comes back to the point after a little bit of pressure, but not really able to break through, and it hops on Ehlers at the blue line, and it goes into the neutral zone. It's like, man, it is, when you have that zone time, it is really tough to tag up and get back in and get that set up again. But they're able to dump it in, they get the puck back, and it comes to Ehlers with like 8 seconds left, and he goes to hammer one, and he whiffs on it. And oh no. So Lowry, in a battle normally reserved for the front of the net, instead happening at the top of the circle, chips it back to Ehlers, who goes from 2 absolute bonehead plays to a perfect pass diagonally across the entire zone. That, I mean, if we really want to diagnose what happened, maybe St. Louis, don't let that happen. But it goes across the entire zone. Connor, heads up, just fires it toward the goal, and Perfetti is able to get the deflection in front. Like, it just goes from near disaster to absolute pandemonium in the whiteout, in Winnipeg, and sets this team up now for an incredible comeback victory. I don't think that all of this ignores what happened with Connor Hellebuyck in this game, but I do think when you are looking at just the mentality of a hockey team, to have this sort of thing hanging over you, that you're not clutch choke artists. I had said they quit in this series, and I will still stand by that. I think there were stretches where they did quit in this series. Maybe not even quit in just like who cares, but just in a, man, maybe we just don't have it. Maybe we just don't do it. I think that they had something in them that really got to them. And so to hear all of that and to change it in literally 2 seconds is incredible. That I feel like that has to be the monkey off of the back for so many of these guys to push toward now the second round against the Dallas Stars, to be able to put that can't win the big one behind them and be able to move on in the way that they are now is spectacular. The one thing is that there is still this Hellebuck question. And we had said that games, what was it, 3 and 4, I guess? That wasn't Hellebuck's fault. That was not. But then coming out of the Game 5 win, I was saying, like, look, they won. This was concerning. The goals that he was allowing, those were a problem. And I do think home ice advantage really played a factor in the 2 Game 7s, by the way, that we saw. I think home ice advantage is one of the big winners of the weekend, because you have the Jets come up with a fantastic come from behind win, as do the Dallas Stars. And if that game is in St. Louis, I think Hellebuck gives up 7, because he was not good in this game. And I made the joke on social media, and I think we were give the players some truth serum. I think there was maybe a little bit of truth to it, but they looked like a team that felt like they needed to score before the Blues got a shot. And, I mean, part of that is great job on offense, great job on defense, limiting everything and shutting things down. But also, I do think there was a desperation there. And for Hellebuck, you don't want to, well, let your goalie get 35 saves and figure it out. It is wild that they played almost 100 minutes, and I don't think Hellebuck had 30 saves to make. I think he made 8 in the 2 overtimes. And so you don't necessarily get that, you know what, I came up big when it counted. It's like, no, I got in the way a couple of times, and I allowed our team to win, even though they soundly controlled the back 40 minutes of that game, going into that extra part. But yeah, like on a Hellebuck standpoint, there are still major questions, I think, to ask. I think you have to ask some major questions about what is going on with this particular goalie, because there were those were ones, again, yesterday. You have to make those saves. You simply cannot allow those pucks to go in on you, especially given the circumstances, given the situation, and everything that is going on with this team. You have to make those stops. On the Blues side, I mean, this feels a little like duh, but this has to feel like a gigantic missed opportunity, right? Like they were winning the game with 3 seconds left, and now their season's over. Like that has to feel like a gigantic miss. I don't think they did enough to put the pressure on Hellebuck when they had that advantage, to really lean on him and really put this one away. And again, a lot of that is credit to Winnipeg, but I do think that St. Louis, if you were to look back on this game, and Lord knows they will, I think there were a lot of opportunities that they could have just peppered this guy with shots and really tried to break him down in a way that it felt like it was able to be done. But still, it is a tricky balancing act now with the St. Louis Blues, because I've said it before and I will say it again. There are a lot of pieces on this team that I like. Thomas and Kyrou are guys that you can build around, right? And Buchnevich, he steps up with a big game in this series. Snuggerud looks like he is the real deal. And I think the biggest loss of all of this is we're not going to have Harnarayan with the Snuggerud anymore. By the way, I said it on social media. Harnarayan killed it. Man, he was good. This entire series. I think he has been doing some very good work for a while, but I think this was easily his best work, which is saying a lot, because again, I think the guy has been on point for a very, very long time, as is, evidenced by the fact that he is like the number 2 national guy in Canada in hockey right now. But that beside the point right now. Like, you have some of these young pieces. Binnington has shown that he can be very sharp and very good and help get this team to where they need to get to. But there's also a lot of veteran pieces on the team, right? Like, we just mentioned Buchnevich, but Shen, Fowler, Falk, Parayko. You have a lot of vets on this team, and they've tried to avoid the tear down, rebuild, whatever. And that's great because it keeps you competitive. And they were a moment away from making it to the second round of the playoffs. I do think that there is a counter to that they were like 2 moments away from being eliminated by the Flames in the first round, or not even making it to the first round and being eliminated in the regular season if Calgary doesn't completely crap the bed in a couple of games against the Blues or against Anaheim late. But regardless, this is that balancing act, because on the one hand, this is you were the last team in the playoffs and you pushed the President's Trophy winners to within 2 seconds of being eliminated. That feels like you know what, you did what you could. But this isn't Montreal, who's, you know what, this is a learning experience that they can grow from. St. Louis is learned. St. Louis is a learned hockey team. And so now where is that next step coming from for this particular group? But we're going to do the full off-season preview coming up next week here on Couch Potato Diary. Again, follow me on social media. I am at Primetime Klein, wherever you are socially. And if you're digging the hockey content, we do have all the playlists and stuff now. So I know we kind of bounce around sport to sport on the live streams and on the show. So if you are watching on YouTube or on Daily Motion later, they have all of we have all of the hockey stuff all in one playlist. So you can just kind of binge through all of that. That was not the only insane game of the weekend, as the Dallas Stars win an absolute thriller. A heartbreaking loss for the Colorado Avalanche. The Stars, again, come from 2 down in the third period to pick up a victory. They only needed 60 minutes instead of an extra period and a half like the Winnipeg Jets did. But a phenomenal showing from the Dallas Stars. And again, it is a weekend that we will remember forever based off of all of the madness that happened. And I think it was like 4 times in NHL history, Game 7s, teams with 2-goal lead in the third period ended up blowing it. And twice it happened in 24 hours. Like just the stuff that you couldn't even script. And the extra layer on top of it is it's Rantanen for the Dallas Stars, who steps up in the big time way and provides that spark to get them going. And we had said, given some of the injuries, this was a big players need to make big plays sort of a series. And we had kind of pointed it out when Colorado jumped out to that early advantage. Rantanen was quiet. Johnston was quiet. Obviously, Robertson and Heiskanen were quiet, but they had excuses. But you weren't having the big players stepping up on the Dallas Stars. Well, now they did. Rantanen with back-to-back games with 4 points in a period. Absurd. But really did show why there was a lot of attention being paid to what that whole trade market was doing and why he is so impactful. Because it's one thing when you have the speed and the size and the skill that this dude has in the regular season, but it translates really well to that whole postseason thing. And it took a little bit to get going, but once it got going, my oh my. Like, he gets 4 points in the third period. He could have had a couple of more. He was zinging those passes around. And again, you think of the big power forward and the goal scoring, but his passing was on point in this as well. And he was the one who stepped up and kind of dragged them out of whatever kind of a dull moment they were in what was a very competitive game with Colorado. It's not like they were down in the dumps for a bit or whatever. This was back and forth, and it was just Colorado happened to have 2 go into the net and before Dallas did, and the Stars are able to bounce it back. But Rantanen coming up in this big way just really kind of ties this whole season together and this whole series together. But now also you add Johnston getting the big goal with the 3-2-1 that's going to end up going down as the game winner. Getting him going in this playoff series when he had been kind of quiet is so important now for the Dallas Stars. And I do think a point in this series that has been lost a little bit is how damn good Ottinger was and how his performance really did keep them in this. You think of the Nichushkin net drive, and he's able to make a nice sprawling save. And there was a couple of others where he comes out and challenges. I just thought he was brilliant in this, and it really now sets them up in a very interesting manner going into a playoff series against a team that has also now had to go 7 games in the Winnipeg Jets. So a lot to look at with that one. We're going to be breaking those down again as the show kind of rolls on here, but just absolute brilliance from the Dallas Stars and from their top guys. And now that adds to the heartbreak of Colorado, because this is a devastating loss no matter who is on the other end scoring those goals, right? Up by 2, third period, and you lose. Then you add on to it that it is against your former teammate who was your teammate this year that happens. That's a tough one to kind of come back from a little bit. And now for Colorado, yes, they have the Stanley Cup win. And I'm not going to say, well, window is closed, but that you are now getting further and further away, and you're starting to hear some pretty frustrated takes from Nathan McKinnon about like they were missing their 2 of their top guys and we couldn't beat them. So a lot of questions need to be asked. I thought this roster was built very well. Landeskog comes back. They make a couple of very good additions at the trade deadline, picking up Nelson and Coyle and trying to add to the center depth, which you absolutely need in the Western Conference. And they just they weren't able to get by this. And again, they were 5 minutes away from being able to, and they just couldn't finish this one. There's going to be obviously a lot of debate about the Rantanen thing, and this exact situation is why I was critical of the handling of the Rantanen thing and how it all played out. More specifically on the Carolina side, if I were to be honest about it. But I still think when you look at what Colorado's objectives are, you have Nathan MacKinnon, who is very good at this sport, and you want to try to maximize everything you can. I still feel like, while they did a pretty good job, and it ends up getting, like, Nate just fits in really well with MacKinnon, and so you have found another dynamic duo for MacKinnon, so you recover it really well. No one on that team can play as well, aside from one guy, no one on that team can play as well as Rantanen can. And so it is kind of a, as weird as it is to talk about this in sports, it's a cost-benefit analysis thing. For the Avalanche, okay, so you have a little bit more long-term stability. You get something in return for this guy. That's great. You're also out in the first round now. So was it worth it is the question. And this very result could have happened the exact same way. If Rantanen stays and they push their way against the Dallas Stars again, maybe it is someone else on Dallas who is stepping up in that way, and it's the Avalanche that are going home. But you cannot tell me that the Avalanche made themselves a better hockey team this year with that Rantanen trade. And I understand you don't want your guy leaving for free, but then trade him for some neg rights in the third round. Because I have to believe that from an Avalanche standpoint, you have to take advantage of this time that you have Nathan MacKinnon playing at his peak. And while they do going forward, and long-term thinking is great, and someone can clip this and put it out in a year when Colorado is skating around with the Stanley Cup, and Nate just had 15 goals in the playoffs, and hey, look at this. They figured it out, and they actually made the right move. But I just think you have to maximize your minutes with Nathan MacKinnon, and I don't think they did that this year with the Rantanen move. I still think Carolina screwed that one up the most, personally, but I still think from a Colorado standpoint, they're going to have a long time to talk about this now. We'll talk about it a little bit more in the offseason preview next week, but this one's a tough one for the Colorado Avalanche to stomach. But again, just a phenomenal weekend in the sport of hockey. Let's move now from hockey. We'll get back to hockey in a little bit. We're going to talk about the Matt Coronado contract with the Calgary Flames, and we will tee up the Stanley Cup playoffs next round with the East and Western Conference Semi-Finals. Going to be previewing all four, or I guess, yeah. Oh, do we only have 4 series? Oh, my goodness. We'll preview all 4 series that are coming up here in just a little bit. But I do want to move now to basketball, as they also had a Game 7, a couple of them, actually, over the weekend. It was the Golden State Warriors advancing in a heck of a series. So let's break it all down, shall we? Always forget that you can hear the sounds when that is playing. The Golden State Warriors are off to the second round, but by God, it was not easy, as they pull out a hard-fought series win over the Houston Rockets. And a lot of times, if you were going to be talking about a Steph Curry series win and all of that, it would be, well, it was Curry came up big. And he did at times, but he is not the reason they won this 7th game. And that is why this Golden State team is a little bit more dangerous now than they have been kind of post KD. And I guess like post 2022 championship. With Jimmy Butler there now and some of the other additions that they made, this is a team that, I'm not going to say Steph had an off night, but if you just focus all of your powers on taking Steph away, they can still beat you. It is a lot more difficult for them to do it, but they can still beat you. And that is what happened here. First off, Jimmy Butler. And I know maybe his stat line isn't going to be the biggest one, but he came up with some absolutely massive shots. And it is his ability to score when he has a hand in his face and these contested opportunities against guys bigger than him. His ability to score in those situations that I think really helped them kind of ice this game away against Houston and ice this series away against Houston is what makes them so dangerous, that you can have, it's like one of those like guys who are really good at 50-50 balls in the NFL, where it's like, Is it 50-50? Like, if you have him covered, you don't really have him covered. That's kind of with Jimmy, where you can have him checked, but do you really? Because he can still hit a shot with you in his face. And he came up with a couple of those big ones late. It is a weapon that they haven't had since Poole and all. Like, Wiggins could be that. And was that when they won that championship, which is why I think this Butler piece is important. It was that you could have this other scoring option that was so dangerous and was able to kind of put them over the top. Butler can be that with these guys. And I know that this part has been done to death, but the basketball IQ that he has that helps him kind of put everything together is... It fits with this whole team so very effectively. And you really do see where this team could be dangerous with him. But then it was some other guys who were massive, especially early on. I saw a clip leading into the day of Draymond Green and how he played in Game 7 against the Cavaliers before Cleveland kind of put that one away. But when, like in the early going of that game, it was Draymond who was putting up some big shots and making some big shots early. And he did that again here. Not a ton, but just enough that it kind of kept their heads above water, because Houston was doing an excellent job of taking Steph Curry away. It was just Draymond and Hield, who we'll get to in a second, were lighting it up offensively. And again, just kind of keeping their heads above water, letting Steph work through whatever he needed to work through, force Houston to keep putting that pressure on him. We're just going to come over here, stay over here, and just kind of keep doing what we've been doing. And Green was great at that. And then Buddy Hield really set that tone early with how he was able to score the basketball. And that kind of quieted down as the game went on, but that was exactly what you needed. And again, you think of the 22 team, and I get there's no Klay Thompson on this group, but it was Wiggins who was able to make some shots. It was Poole who was able to make some shots. You had those guys who could contribute, so it wasn't just Steph. Again, it's a lot of Steph, and I'm not saying like Curry can just sit for 4 and Golden State's going to be fine. They are going to need Steph to play at an elite level in this series, but against Minnesota. But you at least don't have him having to carry everything now because of what these guys were doing. And it is why when we did the offseason previews a year ago, looking at it from the Raptor fan standpoint here, I really thought that he was a guy that maybe you could have brought in from a Raptor standpoint, build up that value and try to trade him. The problem was he already had a little bit of value and goes to a perfect situation out in Golden State. But when he is on, that is a very talented offensive guy and is really difficult to beat. And it does seem like he has kind of found his area with Golden State now. And the other part of it was defensively. Again, like, he's not going to get Defensive Player of the Year votes ever, but he came up with a couple of big stops and at least a couple of pesky moments to hold up guys that allowed other players to make big stops. He was all around it and a very big part of this game. And then Curry, he is finally able to break free and put this game away late. And you could see the difference when Curry is being shut down and okay, well, we're up by 7, up by 9, whatever. And then Curry gets going and we're up by 19. That is the Steph Curry effect. We'll preview this in a little bit, but it's an interesting matchup now with Minnesota in the next round. And a lot of fascinating kind of counterpoint when you break that series down. On the Houston side of this discussion, you have to be impressed with this team, right? Like the youth that they have, the intensity that they played with, and to push Golden State to the 7th game is very, very impressive from them. And again, we will do off-season previews fully next week. But for now, looking at this, I think they have a championship level foundation with what they have. And they are going to be a very, very popular Kevin Durant, Giannis Antetokounmpo organization when people are throwing trade machine trades together, because they have a lot of stuff. They have a lot of very, very attractive pieces if you want to move on from one of those stars. And they have a bunch of draft picks and everything like that too, right? So they have a situation that they can kind of build this thing out. If you want to go out and make that big splash for a super duper star, you can go out and do that. I would be concerned about that a little bit, because I do think, like I said, they have something growing out in Houston. They have built up that foundation that you need. And they have a lot of very talented kids on this group. And yes, like they probably needed a guy to close these games out. And a Kevin Durant, I think, works really well there. And Giannis probably fits what they're trying to do from a defensive standpoint a little bit better. But then you look at just how effectively all of these pieces kind of mesh together, with Van Vliet and Brooks being the elder statesman, helping Thompson, who had an unbelievable series defensively and is, I think, just scratching the surface of what he can do on offense. And Şengün and Adams, and how they were beasts on the offensive rebounding side. It is tempting to say, okay, well, let's just package 4 things together, get a superstar, and that'll put us over the top. But we have seen, while again, understanding the picture over my shoulder with Kawhi, that sometimes it works. But more often than not, it hasn't. Why is Kevin Durant available? Because the last 2 spots that he has been that hired gun, it hasn't worked. So the spot that it did work was already an established foundation. And just not to go too deep into it, but you look at the Raptors. In 19, they obviously make the big trade, but is that they had that established foundation already going in. Houston does have that. You just don't want to rock it too much, pardon the pun, when you are bringing in one of these guys. So it is going to be very tempting to try to go out and make the big splash after big splash to get this team over the top. But this team finished second in the West, and no one batted an eye at that. I think they are very close to the top already. There was the other Game 7 happened over on Saturday. Not going to go too in depth on it, but we'll preview the Denver series in a little bit. But the Denver Nuggets are able to battle their way through and make their way to the conference semifinals, which started yesterday as the Indiana Pacers and the why am I blank? Cleveland Cavaliers. There we go. Those teams faced off in the start of the second round, and just a perfect start for the Pacers. To get a win on the road is gigantic for this team. And they're a significant underdog in this. And I do think that it was them being, I think, overlooked a little bit in this series. And the thing that was kind of why, and we've talked about it here before, and it showed up in Game 1, the defense on this team is different than it was a year ago. Again, this isn't Reggie Miller getting blocked at 69-67 of the fourth quarter. It's not like that lockdown type of a defense, but the defensive intensity has grown with this group from a season ago, and they have been able to battle through and get a number of different opportunities and create turnovers and create more offense off of that. And they still have a high-level offense, and they did a great job pushing off of makes for Cleveland, and now it'll be interesting to see how Cleveland kind of responds to that in this game. But it is the defense that sets this team up and sets them apart from the one that we saw in this playoff time a year ago. And another big part of it too, Tyrese Halliburton just stepped up in a monumental way when this team needed it. And there are still some times where things are starting to get a little bit sideways, and he's looking for that big dagger 3 to either get his team back into it or to take the other crowd out of it. And that's not where he is the most effective. He is the most effective getting into the lane and creating opportunities off of that. And then again, big guy stepping up in big time. Siakam made a couple of big shots early on to get this team settled into the game. Nembhard coming up again with a couple of very good offensive plays to get this team rolling. And the full effort on defense means that this is a series. This isn't going to be Cleveland just rolling through these guys. This is a series. And I do think now it's going to be very interesting to see the counterpunch from the Cleveland Cavaliers and kind of how they handle what the Pacers were trying to do to them, and how do you slow down that shooting stroke that Indiana had going so very well. So, I don't even think Cleveland played that bad of a game, to be honest. I was just so impressed with what Indiana did. I didn't think this was a lot of what Cleveland did wrong. I thought Mitchell, again, was attacking really effectively, getting into the paint, creating opportunities. You got a couple of depth guys missing some shots that you would have liked to see them hit, but Allen was just a monster on the defensive end, and his movement has gotten so much better. And Mobley, you can see the well-rounded nature of his game and how that has kind of developed. So they played really well. The Pacers just played better in Game 1. Let's get back to the ice now, as the Calgary Flames lock up a big part of their future with Matt Coronato signing an extension. And this got a lot of people talking. Look, there is no other way to say it. This is a home run for the Calgary Flames. I'll explain why. So, Matt Coronato has signed a big extension with the Flames. It is a 7-year contract worth $6.5 million. And this was one I was interested in seeing the reactions to. Here in Calgary, no-brainer, 100% lock, basically. out in the hockey world, look, the Flames aren't making it on ESPN all that often, okay? And the TNT broadcast doesn't bring up the Flames a whole lot, but this is a guy who is just a pure goal scorer. That shot is as wicked as it comes. And when you are a young team looking to kind of develop, and one of the things that people were talking about with this Flames team, and rightfully so still, is that they are missing that like number one type of a game breaker. And I think when you look at the NHL roster right now, at the forward group anyway, the guy who has the best chance, as we sit here on May 5th, 2025, the guy who has the best chance of breaking through in that sort of a way is Matt Coronado, because of just how wicked and how lethal that wrist shot is, the scoring ability, and we saw this year, there's a bit more of a well-rounded nature to his game. He's not signing this extension because he played well on the fourth line. He is signing this extension because he is a goal scorer. And this league, it is because of how big goalies can get and how things can kind of bog down at times. Having that ability to steal the basketball phrase, score from distance, is huge. The Flames don't have that aside from this guy. Sharon Govich too. But he showed this year that he is everything they thought he could be. And I think getting that experience with Backlund and Coleman really does now let him grow into a bit more of a well-rounded role. And that is why I have the faith that he is going to turn into a very solid player going forward with this team. Is he showed that he was more than just an offensive guy. He showed that he is someone who, he's not going to get Selke votes at any point in his career or anything like that. But he did prove that he can fit on a fourth line if he needs to. That was one of the discussions, right? Like, he wasn't playing a whole lot, and they're, okay, well, we need to get him in there, but we like how our top six is, so we're going to put him on the fourth line. It's like, well, this guy's not a fourth liner. Like, what are you doing? Like, that's not his skill set. He showed that it was. He goes out, he battles, he takes that fourth line mentality, moves it up the lineup, eventually settles in a really good spot with Backlund and Coleman, and kind of sits under their learning tree. And I am sure Flames management chatted with Michael Backlund, the captain of this team, like, hey, did this kid get it the way it kind of seemed like he got it? And so there are no such thing as sure things in the NHL. And the Flames just had experience with this with Sharon Govich last year, where all these things that we're saying about Coronado, you can say about Sharon Govich. Lethal shot, high-level scorer, fills a need that this team lacks when it comes to that high level of goal scoring. And so you have to lock that guy in. And he had a dud this year. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it, but it did seem like he kind of found something at the end of the year. With Coronado, though, this is something that this isn't like Sharon Govich, where, he just hadn't really got an opportunity at the NHL, and now look what he has. This is a guy who has scored at every level that he has played at, and he has checked all of those boxes all the way up into the National Hockey League, and now he is checking the box at the NHL. So when the guy shows a skill in junior and college, wherever, and you project that he is going to continue to show that skill at the NHL, and then he continues to show that skill at the NHL, it is very easy to lock that guy in to a longer-term contract. So I think this is a great move for the Flames. I really do. And could there be some downside for a guy who is, while I do think, again, some improvements and showed a good, well-rounded nature to his game, the way that this goes badly is obviously if he just becomes a one-note hockey player and then that note starts to go away. That's where this starts to become a bit of a problem. But, I mean, for now, this felt obvious. And another part of it, too, and I don't think this is the biggest part. I don't think it should have been the biggest part, but I don't think it's nothing either. This team has a reputation right now, at least amongst people on social media, that American players don't want to come to Calgary, and when they do, all they want to do is leave. When Tkachuk left and Gaudreau left in the same offseason, you just had a tough time convincing people that American-born players wanted to sign here. Well, that's what Coronado is, and he just signed an extension. And so I do think from just a reputational standpoint, from an image standpoint, I think all of those things become very, very important for the Flames in locking up a Matt Coronado. So a very, very smart move, I think, for the Calgary Flames that they were able to pull off here this weekend, in locking in Matt Coronado. So still a lot of Flames talk that'll be coming as the weeks and months go on. Want to get back into the playoff discussions, though, as we are now into the conference semifinals in the Stanley Cup playoffs with intriguing matchups abound. So let's break them all down as we run through the second round of the Stanley Cup playoffs. The Stanley Cup playoffs now reach their second round as we are down now to just somehow, some way, 4 series left. The NHL's Elite Eight now get ready to embark on what will be, again, a grind of the next couple of weeks. Let's start our breakdown in the Eastern Conference as the Florida Panthers are taking on the Toronto Maple Leafs. The Leafs will have home ice advantage in this series as they win the division for just the second time since 2002. But I would suggest that they're coming into this as the underdog, as the Leafs put away the Ottawa Senators in 6, which is one more game than it took the Panthers to dispatch of the Tampa Bay Lightning. I think if you were to look at regular season stuff, I just don't think you can at this point. Florida was banged up a lot with Ekblad being suspended, Tkachuk having some injury problems, Marchand having some injury problems as well. Toronto, different goalies bouncing in and out of the lineup and all of that. And also, we have seen with the Buds, regular season success does not equal playoff success necessarily. So, and I mean, in this last series, they lost the season series to Ottawa and came out and put them away. So I don't think we can look a lot at what we have seen in the postseason, or in the regular season leading up to this. As far as what we've seen from the playoffs, the Panthers look like the best team in the East. They have really started to put everything together. Again, you can see where everything is starting to click into place. After the Marchand deal, he comes in a little bit banged up. Tkachuk was hurt until basically the start of the postseason. Ekblad was suspended for the last third of the year as well. He is now working his way into it, and you can see where everything fits, and you can see where the plan is, and all of a sudden, this looks like a juggernaut of a hockey team again. It is the assumption that they play a heavy, grinded out style. And they do. Like, for a lot of it, that is an accurate assessment of how this hockey team performs. But I would also suggest that they can speed and skill it up with the best of them. I think Matthew Tkachuk, I'm not going to say he's underrated, because I think everyone kind of understands at this point this is one of the best players in the National Hockey League, but I don't think he gets enough credit for the skill aspect of his game. He's not a burner, but he can still hang out there, and he can still make that work. So I just think that there's a lot of different ways you look at how the Leafs are going to want to play this series, and I don't know how much of an edge they have on Florida in, quite frankly, any of them. So while I do think that the Leafs have checked a lot of boxes for what you needed to see, I do just think it is a bit of a different animal now when you are going up against this Florida Panthers team, with how responsible they are on offense, but how they can also be a bit high-flying. And kind of the same on defense, that they can kind of shut things down defensively, but like Forsling, Ekblad, all those guys, Jones, they can also go out and light the lamp on the offensive side. And then Bobrovsky, whilst inconsistent at times, it seems like those times aren't in the playoffs as he continues to build up an amazing playoff resume over the last 3 seasons and his entire career. It's a big mountain to climb if you're the Toronto Maple Leafs. On their side, though, I will say that, again, it doesn't seem like it came with the most resistance from Ottawa, but a lot of the things that were problems for them before weren't as much against the Sens. There was a couple of times where had trouble putting them away. Goal scoring starts to dry up a little bit. But this is easily the most defensively responsible Toronto Maple Leafs team that has been into the playoffs since, like, they traded for Brian Leetch. Like, it's been a really long time. And I think all of that is because of how well Tanev has played. And it just kind of filters out to the rest of the team. Matthews coming up with some big goals in big games. We've never said that before. He has had big chances in big games and hasn't really been able to capitalize. They were scoring on the power play, and that is something that now, as we get into the second round, the opportunities start to dry up a little bit. But that is still something that they weren't doing in playoffs past. So they are really doing a great job of playing a playoff style of hockey. And so if they can kind of keep that up, if you just look at on roster, Toronto still has a very high level of talent, and I think can kind of match the high level that the Florida Panthers can play. It is just the Panthers do have another gear that we have seen, and we haven't from Toronto yet. So I think this is going to be a good series. I do think it'll be Panthers in 6. The other Eastern Conference series, which is, I think, how the NHL is going to market it too, because there is not a whole lot that is very enticing about Washington against Carolina, I will say, coming out of that first round. Like, Carolina, New Jersey was a bit of a dud. I think these are both very good hockey teams. And I do think kind of once the of that Carolina-New Jersey series kind of goes away. Like, once we see this is going to be a series that's going to be a little bit easier to get into. Again, it is Washington with Ovechkin and Dubois and Strome, who are playing so well right now, going up against this Carolina team that kind of turned into a bit of an offensive juggernaut as that series with the Devils went along. They were peppering Markstrom with shots and really creating a lot of great opportunities. So this is, while I said it's a bit of a as you talk about it and as you go into it a little bit further and a little bit more in depth, this does become a very interesting series when you start to break it all down. The one area that I think is kind of the biggest check mark in this, and the reason why I am picking Washington in this series, while it looked like he might have died for a second, Logan Thompson has been spectacular. And I have more faith that that is going to continue than I have faith in the Carolina goaltending holding up for 7 games in this series. So when you look at the offensive side, I think the forward groups, obviously Washington has the greatest goal scorer of all time. Carolina has a pretty good group of forwards. Defensively, Carolina lost quite a bit in the offseason. I still think they have a good group. I do think Washington's a little bit better. So it does feel like you can kind of counter off a bunch of different aspects of the game, but they just all don't. None of it really weighs out the way I think goaltending does. So I think Washington is able to get the job done. I honestly, I do think a lot of Carolina and Rob Brindamore and all of that. I do think this has the potential to be a 5-game series, but I will say Washington in 6. So that's the story from the Eastern Conference. Moving out to the West, it is the Vegas Golden Knights taking on the Edmonton Oilers. Edmonton coming off of a very intense series with the Los Angeles Kings and have started to hit their stride a little bit. For Vegas, I don't think that they have yet, but they still are able to get past the Minnesota Wild. And again, let's just break this whole thing down. Looking at the forward groups, obviously, it's such a fun matchup because it's McDavid, Eichel, Draisaitl, Stone. It is kind of these sides match up quite well. And I think it is extra interesting when you look at the depth situation, because that has long been a problem for Edmonton, but that depth admittedly starts to play a little bit better against the LA Kings as that series went along. And in that last game, they got 6 goals against the Kings. None of them were scored by humans named McDavid and Draisaitl, which means that those guys are obviously falling off. No, but that's huge, right? To get Brown and Henrique and all of those guys going is massive. Just a quick aside, watching the highlights and the NHL's YouTube channel, the highlights are from ESPN, and they had the guy on there calling it, who I'm not overly familiar with. I'm sure is very good at it, but Nugent Hopkins and Hyman scored. And it's, that depth scoring for the Oilers. Man, maybe we can't be calling anyone not Draisaitl and McDavid depth scoring. Hyman scored 50 a season ago. Nugent's a former first overall pick. Both these guys are top 6 dudes on their team. That's not what we have in mind when we're talking about the depth scoring for these guys. If that were the case, then every player on the Flames was depth scoring this year. These are guys who play in their top 6. We can't be doing that. So that's just a quick aside. On the Vegas side, the high-end guys haven't really been scoring. The depth has been able to step up, but that does not seem sustainable at all. And if Vegas is going to win this series, we have to be talking about Eichel like he was the best player in it. That's basically what this comes down to, is he has to be the guy who steps up here for Vegas and wins them a couple of games. Because you just can't rely on Karlsson and Howden and all of these guys to get the goals for you. It has to be the Eichels, the Stones, the Smiths, those guys. Dorofeev, that group has to be the one stepping up to get this team going. It can't be those depth players anymore. On the blue line, you like the Vegas defense, I think, much better than Edmonton's. Bouchard, Nurse, they can be all over the place. They have obviously been discussed quite a bit, but you look at what Vegas can trot out there on that blue line, and it's exceptional what they have. So they get a big check mark there, and then you feel better about where they're at in goal too, with Aiden Hill. Pickard coming up with a few massive moments for Edmonton, but again, I am wondering at the sustainability of that from an Edmonton standpoint. I think when you look at Vegas, again, I just think they are built a little bit better than Edmonton is right now, but it really is going to come down to that high-level forward group of Eichel, McDavid, and who is going to step up in that big-time way. Then the last series, Winnipeg against Dallas. Look, if that first game is just everyone dragging ass and it's a 1-0 whatever, no one's going to complain because of what these two teams just went through in Game 7 over the weekend. An incredible showing from both sides. I think a massive part of this is the health of Scheifele. He was at another level when he was healthy in that series for Winnipeg against St. Louis and really making everyone around him better. And when you look at how the stars stack up down the middle, if Scheifele isn't there, then, bless them for what they were able to do against St. Louis, but this Stars team is significantly better than the St. Louis Blues. And again, I don't want to take away anything from the amazing win that Winnipeg had in that series, but I think the other 7 teams in the West would have dismantled with St. Louis in 5, right? I don't think the Blues did a lot to push Winnipeg into that area. I don't think it took a whole lot of pushing to get Winnipeg to be thrown off of their game. And now when you look at the high level that Dallas can play with Rantanen going, Hintz, who had a bit of a rough one in Game 7, but had a really good Game 6, Wyatt Johnston is getting rolling again. And then you look at the goaltending matchup. Ottinger, we know how good he can be in these big situations. And we know what Hellebuck can be in these situations as well. Now, maybe that win is enough to just level everybody up. But if Scheifele isn't there, I don't think the series is close. If Scheifele is there, I think it's a little bit closer. And I think it is a battle. But seeing those last couple of games and seeing Dallas really get rolling, this is a team that everyone should be deathly afraid of in the Western Conference now. So I am going to stay, I guess I didn't make a pick. I'm going to say Vegas in 6, and I'm going to say, man, this seems really dismissive, and I am so sorry, Winnipeg fans. I'm saying Stars in 5. I just think that they found something against Colorado, and while Winnipeg also found something against St. Louis, I think that it is more impressive finding it against Colorado than I do finding it against St. Louis. So I just think that there is a little bit of a gap between what these teams can do this time of year. So that is the preview of the second round of the NHL playoffs. We have a second round in the NBA playoffs as well, as we are down to that sports Elite 8 as well. One series has already gotten going. We talked about the Pacers and the Cavs earlier. Let's break down the other 3, starting with a battle of big cities out east. The NBA is salivating with some major matchups in the second round of the NBA's playoffs. Let's begin out east as you get major market against major market. It's the Knicks, it's the Celtics. Every sport loves to have themselves a Boston versus New York series. This one, though, I don't know if it's going to last very long. While I love this Knicks team, I have concerns that it took that much to put the Pistons away, and the Celtics, I'm not going to say they had an easy time because they got a little bit banged up in that series with Orlando, and Orlando can be a little bit tough to play, but they only had to deal with that for a couple of games, and now they've been sitting and watching while the Knicks have been beating themselves up against the Detroit Pistons. The Knicks made a couple moves this offseason to try to counter what Boston can do. Specifically, they brought in Bridges, and I think the thought there is, there's a rapport, obviously. But the thought is we have Bridges and Anunoby that can kind of lock up on Tatum and on Brown. And then after that, we have Brunson, we have Hart, and we have Towns. They can outscore White, Holiday, and Porzingis, and now we're going to have the advantage there. The problem is that has not worked. Tatum has really beat up on the Knicks this year, and the Celtics have really beat up on the Knicks this year. And it's just, this was where it was always going to be really challenging for New York because they rather famously struggled in the regular season against the Celtics, the Cavs, and the Thunder, not being able to beat any of those teams in important, at least, regular season games. That is a gigantic red flag. And it is all because those guys have not been able to stop Tatum and Brown, specifically Tatum, who's kind of gone off on them as the season went on. So if those guys can step up and find the way to lock down Tatum and Brown there, I think that would be, I mean, just a gigantic boost for this team. Obviously, I just don't see it happening. I think the more likely scenario is that White or whoever can do a good job of locking down a Jalen Brunson, and now all of a sudden the Knicks, while they are effective when Brunson's not on the floor, now all of a sudden the Knicks have to try to figure out a way to get things going without their number one offensive threat. So I think while trying to match up with Boston, they almost, because it didn't work exactly, they have almost created a really, really bad style matchup for themselves, and that's going to be a big problem for this group in this series. I don't think the Celtics have much problem with it. They are the minus 700 favorites going into this right now. I think they kind of mop the floor with the Knicks, and I think a lot of questions will be asked coming out of this one. I think the Celtics cruise to a 5-game series win. Out in the Western Conference, you have the Denver Nuggets taking on the Oklahoma City Thunder. It is a Nuggets team that won a championship a couple of years ago against a Thunder team that people are thinking are going to be contending for titles for years to come. Initially, you look at this one, and I mean, it's a fantastic matchup. Both matchups out west are really good, and you can see where Denver would have the edge, right? Like that. While okay, Hartenstein and Chet and all those guys are great, but it's Jokic, it's Murray, it's Porter, it's Gordon, it's Westbrook when he's going, it's Brown. Like this is a high level team, but then that's kind of all it is. And with the Thunder, holy smokes, like Shea playing at an MVP level. And then after, like, the Dort and the guys who we mentioned, and Wiggins and the Williams, and it's just, there is so much high-level talent on this Oklahoma City team. So obviously, like, the way that Denver wins this series is that Jokic is the best player. And honestly, I think the way they win this series is Jokic is the best player. You will grant SGA second. I think Murray has to be the third best player in this series. It can't be a Williams or a Holmgren or whoever Oklahoma City wants to put out there. Jamal Murray, the Murray that showed up for 40 off in game 6 and has had major playoff performances, he has to show up for 7 games, and he has to be the third best player in this series. If Denver has 2 of the best 3 players, that is their path to victory, and honestly, I think kind of their own path. Their only, path to a win. It just gets so difficult because this Oklahoma City team is relentless defensively. And I think if Jokic wants to move away from the basket a little bit and try to create up top, okay, fine. You have one guy who can do that, but the rest of the defense is so locked down that no one's getting away there. And so, okay, we're going to pin him down on the perimeter, pin him down in the paint. Well, we have some of the best help defenders in the league that can come double, even triple team him, and we still trust our athleticism and our defensive awareness to be able to rotate around it. So it's just, they are relentless, they are very difficult to play against, and they can light it up on you offensively. So Denver kind of has to hope that all of their guys can play to the absolute peak of their abilities. Oklahoma City goes on a 4-game shooting drought, and then maybe. So it feels like when you're looking at paths to victory in this series, it is easier to get there from an Oklahoma City standpoint than it is for Denver. With Oklahoma City, you can kind of pick and choose a few different ways that they're able to really go. But for Denver, it is basically everyone who's awesome or has been awesome before has to stay awesome for 7 games, and then maybe we will see. But Oklahoma City has so many guys that can throw you into a torture chamber on defense and really just lock this thing down. And all those great cuts and all the great movements and everything that Denver's offense can do, I think Oklahoma City can have a counter for that. So I think OKC gets the job done. I think it's going to be a very fascinating series, but I don't think it's going to be a long one. I think it's OKC in 5 again. And now Minnesota against Golden State. Again, a fascinating matchup. When you look at how the Warriors just battled through that Houston team to get into this, to go from the play-in to the second round. I mean, the obvious thing is, hey, if you can shut down Curry, that feels pretty big. Because again, like we talked about it a little bit earlier, with how well the Rockets kind of limited Steph Curry. Okay, yes, but then Golden State went out and did that thing where it was Hield, it was Green, it was Butler, who were putting on the performances that kind of got them the rest of the way. Okay, fine. Do that 4 times against us. If you can do that 4 times against us, Fine, we'll do that. The interesting matchup here, because there's a lot of very, I think, fascinating subplots with this series. But what does Rudy Gobert do in this? Because it was one thing when he went out there and he just dominated size-wise against the Lakers, especially in that last game. While there isn't that major size, for sure, on the Golden State Warriors, and you would assume that he would have a bit of that height edge to him or something like that, these are also kind of the smaller teams that he has been played off of the floor against before. And I think that Jimmy Butler would take great joy in doing that to Minnesota. Well, I mean, the remnants of Minnesota aren't there anymore from his time a long time ago. I do still think that this is a guy who motivates himself in that way. And I think he would take great joy in that. I do wonder, like, what do they do with Gobert, and how does Golden State kind of attack that? Because, like, there isn't an obvious center most of the time with Golden State out there, and you can't have him on Draymond because he is so active out on the outside, and that's taking him away from what you need. Now, we kind of talked about this, how the Lakers had an offense that could play him off of the floor at times, and that obviously didn't happen. So they have obviously adjusted things in that way. All of this may not matter because Anthony Edwards is that good. And he has been just an absolute beast at times. And now it can go cold. Shooting the basketball can go cold at times for him. But then again, you look at some of the depth pieces that they have had, and like Gobert steps up in a big time way. DiVincenzo has been excellent at times, and Julius Randle found another level in that Lakers series. And so when you are stacking that up against Golden State, yes, it is Butler and it's Hield and it's Green who've been able to do that. Podziemski has had some bigger moments in the postseason so far as well, but I just don't think they stack up as well now against Minnesota's either. And so I worry that Minnesota has the best player and maybe the best secondary options behind that. And it could be difficult. Again, the way Golden State wins this is that their offense is able to play Gobert off of the floor, and Minnesota tries to take Curry away, and now Butler has a big series, and now you don't know where to go, and now this free-flowing offense can go. Minnesota's defense is so good, I don't necessarily anticipate that happening, but I think this is going to be another battle. I think it's going to be another long one. I think it's going to be very fascinating to see how this all plays out. I think Minnesota does get the job done, though, in 6. So that is the sportsy part of the stream today. For podcast listeners, this is going to be the end of part 1. Part 2 is going to be looking at the world of combat sports, a weird weekend in boxing, and an interesting weekend coming up in the Ultimate Fighting Championship. So if you're listening in podcast form later, make sure you rate, review, and subscribe, and do all of those things. Again, this is available for those watching live or watching it on YouTube later. You can get this in podcast form over on Spotify or on Apple, wherever you get your podcasts. So for podcast listeners, this is the end of part 1. Part 2 starts now. The combat sports world always seems to light up for Cinco de Mayo weekend. But as we sit here on the Cinco de Mayo, we are scratching our heads after a very perplexing and pretty bad weekend in the sport of boxing. And I think we can kind of figure out what caused it. So we're not going to go fight by fight the way we normally do here. Let's break this one down and just see where it all went down in the sport of boxing. It has become tradition that the sport of boxing takes over on Cinco de Mayo weekend. For a long time, it was Canelo Alvarez finding this weekend. Before that, Floyd Mayweather was able to have success box office-wise, fighting around this time. A lot of big moments. This is one of the tent poles of the year in the boxing community. Well, the tent pole blew over this week because it was an awful weekend of boxing. I don't think there's any way to sugarcoat this aside from saying this was a bad weekend in the sport of boxing. The spectacle on Friday was neat, but none of the fights delivered. Teofimo Lopez had just a sparkling defensive performance in his fight. The great counterpunching and defense of a guy third from the top should not be the highlight of your show. And that is what it was. And then it got a little bit better on Saturday, but then Canelo against Skull, was just a dud. Inoue does have a bit of a dramatic win on Sunday as he gets put on his keister and still comes away with a win, but it's far from saving the weekend. This was horrendous. It was really, really bad. And I think, like, Friday, you can kind of make a bit of an excuse for some of the fighters initially, right? Like, it's a weird thing that there isn't a setup at Times Square for these guys to fight in. They weren't able to go to the Jollibee that was over there to get warmed up, to get everything like that. They had to go to, I think it was at the Fighter Hotel. They got their stuff all ready to go, and then they drove. Ryan Garcia took the Batmobile. They drove from the hotel up to the arena, do your entrance, walk in, and do it that way. That's weird. That is different from the normal that you experience as a boxer, right? And so I can understand how that would throw you off a little bit for the first few rounds. But I feel like by the sixth, we should be warmed. We should be that lather that they talk about. They should have that. We should know what's happening and be able to adjust and be able to actually do something here on the fighting side of it. And instead, it never clicked. And so then again, okay, atmosphere. No one paid to be here. You had a bunch of celebrities, a bunch of celebrity lookalikes, which was odd. That was so weird. And also caught Lampley off guard, which was really funny when he was like, "Oh, well, Snoop Dogg's here." And Mike Cominger said, "Well, close." And then you realize that they're lookalikes. And it's just, okay, well, that's weird. And then, so you have a bunch of people sitting around the ring who have been invited, but aren't really making a whole lot of noise. And so when you are used to fighting in hockey rinks or football stadiums, it's a bit different when you're fighting in front of 18 people and none of them are making any noise because they're just kind of there to see something that it's tough to get the adrenaline flowing. But that should only be an excuse for the first 6 rounds. And it's like, okay, you know what? This isn't happening. We need to figure it out in a different way. I can't imagine that all these guys had this issue for 12 rounds. It was brutal. It was a bunch of fighters playing it safe. For the big, and I am more specifically going in on the Friday thing because of the spectacle that was supposed to be. We'll talk about the Canelo thing in a second here, but when you were looking at the fights on Friday, the Teofimo fight, the Haney fight, and the Garcia fight, all of these guys were keeping it safe. I will take Teofimo out of that because I think that he just fought a very good counter striking game, and he did it masterfully, by the way. Like, he was really good on Friday night, sorry. But for Haney and Garcia, it looked like they were trying to keep it safe. And this is one of the issues with how this all went down, because Turkey puts on this big thing for Cinco de Mayo weekend, and we're going to do something that's never been done before, and it's Times Square. And it was basically used as like the Raw go-home show before the big pay-per-view coming up later on in the year. Because this was used as the thing to build up Haney against Garcia and the rematch. And like, you looked at the video package that they put together, and it was fun, right? Like, they're going through all these different things in Times Square and meeting the animation style and all of that. But it was talking about Haney against Garcia. And it's like, well, and these guys are going to fight different people tonight. Like, oh, okay. But both fighters, both Haney and Garcia, looked every bit like guys who have a big money fight set up for September or on down the road and just didn't want to get hurt and didn't want to mess that one up a little bit. And so what comes out of that is that you have two performances that makes no one interested in Haney Garcia at all. Now, by the time that fight comes along, there will be enough promo, there'll be enough this, that, or the other thing. Ryan Garcia will have done 9 stupid things, and you'll be able to build up the fight that way, and we won't really remember this. But there were probably a lot of people tuning in, and we are past the point of doing the, oh my God, did this kill boxing? We're past that point, right? But this was the first real step back I think boxing's taken in a while since Saudi money came in and all these mega events are being put on. And I think it was Turkey and co. kind of overthinking things and overplaying their hand a little bit. You can have a bit of a like handshake, like, yeah, Haney Garcia, you guys can get it going. But the fact that it sounds like they had contracts signed and ready to go, it really did seem like it was like, just don't get hurt in there. And we'll see you guys on down the road. There was no urgency. There was no offense even. It was brutal to watch that one. And then Garcia goes out and loses. And that just adds even more to the what the fuckness of the whole thing. Like, just a brutal display in Times Square there on Friday night. And I think one part of it too, that was just a quick aside. Jim Lampley came out of retirement for this one, and he had the I don't give a fuck of a guy who didn't care if he got another job at DAZN or not. Like and I'm sure that I don't think that he is going to get punished for this at all. But even if he did, what does he care? It's like, oh, okay, I'll just go back to being retired then. Like Jim Lampley could host a boxing anything tomorrow, and he would get paid pretty well for it. And so he was just going to be honest about it, and it sucked. And he was saying like, yeah, this was not great. And the one fight where he was saying like, well, in order to dream, you need to be asleep. And that fight put us to sleep. Like just those sorts of things. It was fantastic all night. Also, I know they've kind of been building up Coppinger a little bit, and obviously he has a thing with Turkey with Ring Magazine now, and all of that. But I don't think he's there yet for this sort of a thing. He just like when you compare him to some of the other guys who have been in those spots, he did not have that at all. And I'm not the biggest Mannix guy when it comes to boxing, but Mannix just called circles around Coppinger in that sort of a setting. So like from a broadcast standpoint, it was weird. And like all of that, like that part of it too was weird. You have Kate Scott who does the Champions League stuff for CBS and the broadcast stuff that they do there, and she is dynamite on that. Like the playing off of Thierry Henry and everyone else that they have on there. Like she is one of the best hosts in the world. And so I think she did a really good job. And then you have McAfee, who is him, right? Like he is Pat McAfee in capital letters. And I think again there was a little bit of let's bring some eyeballs in. So instead of just random desk guy X, well, let's bring Pat McAfee in. Now McAfee is doing his show from here on Friday, and now we are getting more buzz, we are getting more attention placed onto our event because this is happening. And McAfee understands selling, understands building it up. I don't think he understood the fighters all that much, and so you get a bit of a whatever, and then it's Mike Tyson as the other color guy. And Mike Tyson is one of the from a fighting standpoint, one of the most respected figures in the history of boxing when it comes to what he can do in the ring and what he did in the ring. I don't know if you've heard him the last little while, though. We're not exactly articulating at our peak levels, let's say. And while the guy at one time was an amazing trash talker with the defenses and pregnant, eat your heart, I'll eat your all that stuff. This was not him. And so having him on the desk, it got uncomfortable every time. And you could feel both McAfee and Kate trying to like keep themselves back from saving him a little bit and just keeping it going, and it just felt like it all came to a stop. And then the broadcast would go to Tyson every now and then while the fights were going on, and now thankfully not a fucking thing was happening when those fights were happening, so okay. But it was like, okay, Mike, you saw something there in that first round. Yeah, these two guys are fighting really, really great, and it's been fun to watch so far. Cool, Mike. Thanks. Appreciate it, dude. It was a lot to bring eyeballs in. And it just didn't seem like a lot of thought was put into, hey, is this going to be good? It was, okay, let's do Times Square. And like the drone shots are cool and all of that. And it's like, okay, well, can we make this in a way where the fighters are going to be comfortable? Not really. No. Okay. Well, whatever. Times Square. Cool. Okay. Well, let's have some big fighters on this. Teofimo Lopez, Devin Haney, and Ryan Garcia. Let's roll with these guys out. Okay. Great. Yeah. There's a rivalry there. We're gonna have them fight each other. No, they're gonna fight different people. So, okay. Well, we can build to that and say if these guys win, they're gonna get it. Right? No, they're gonna have a contract for that anyways. Okay. Well, now they're probably going to be playing it safe in a weird atmosphere that they're not comfortable with. So we're going to need the broadcast crew to be on top of it. Who are we going to have? Pat McAfee. Has he watched any of these guys box before? Doesn't seem like it. No. Cool. All right. Well, we're going to need a real expert. Like he can bring the energy. He can sell. He's a wrestling guy too, right? Like he can sell that. So who are we going to have beside him? Mike Tyson. Can Mike break down any of this stuff now? And again, I'm not disrespecting Mike. Like we all cheered for Mike in that awful fight on Netflix, and have a full respect again for the in-ring abilities of one Mike Tyson. But that he got put into a spot that he shouldn't have been put into. He should have been let's talk to him once about some of the things that he saw and make it, honestly, let's talk to him once 25 minutes before we're going to air it so that we can then chop it up into little chunks and make it seem like it was an awesome in-depth analysis-y thing and have it be that. It all was done for what we can put out on social media and what we can say we did, and none of it was done for, hey, is this actually going to be good? And you then get that with Canelo too. And Canelo, I think, is the bigger overall point of this whole thing, is that you can have dull fights with stakes, or you can have fights with no stakes and a lot of action. You can't have a weekend full of dull fights with no stakes. And that's what Canelo has kind of turned into, is that he has fought a bunch of guys that we now know he is significantly better than. And so because of that, we are going to need to see some exciting fights, but we don't get those either. And so you just get these fights that don't matter, that aren't getting finished, that aren't exciting, but are lasting 36 minutes and just dragging on. So it was just an awful, awful weekend. And we'll still break it all down when these guys fight again, because now apparently it's Canelo and Crawford coming up at a later date as well. So this was a unique outing for DAZN. It was a unique outing for Turkey and this new kind of era of Saudi boxing, and basically all of it failed. So a learning experience for them. In terms of the pay-per-view calendar, it rolls on this weekend, but now in the sport of mixed martial arts, as the UFC gets the headlines for the first time in a bit with UFC 315. A couple intriguing fights at the top of it. Let's take our first look at this Fight Night card in Montreal. It is our Fight Night first look at UFC 315. Two title fights coming north of the border, as in the main event, it will be Belal Muhammad against Jack Della Maddalena for the UFC's welterweight championship. And in the co-main event, Valentina Shevchenko defends her championship against Manon Fiorot in somewhat intriguing card. I will say one that is lacking some star power. I like Belal. I like Jack Della Maddalena. Valentina Shevchenko's an all-timer, and Fiorot is on a bit of a roll, but this is not the biggest names or whatever, and this is also not necessarily the deepest card that we're talking about either, but still a lot of a few storylines to watch as we go into this. So going to break down the two from the main event, or the two main and co-main event fights here today. Also going to look at the Canadian Spotlight on the live stream. For podcast listeners, that's going to be on its own thing tomorrow. And later in the week, we're going to look at the fighters to watch, and then a UFC 315 breakdown to wrap up the week. So this was the big story, I think, here for Belal Muhammad is this is the first title defense. And now he has been trying to build up his popularity, build up that the social media following, and just become a bit of a star. But he's upping the trash talk. He's going to a bunch of events. He's at a ton of wrestling events because he and CM Punk have a pretty good relationship, and now the TKO thing. So he is making his way to a lot of these shows, and so that is great. Like, definitely up your star power. That this is a new height for your career. So try to take advantage of it to the best of your abilities, and make this just a rousing, fun time for yourself. But let's not forget what got you here in the first place, and that's being a high-level mixed martial artist. And so that is where you have some wonders, is how is Belal now going to handle this sort of a spotlight? How is he going to deal with the attention being placed on him and everything that is going to go into that with the different media obligations? And it's in Canada, so you get a little bit extra when it comes to those sorts of things. And how has he kind of handled his trading in the lead up to all of this? It's all going to be very, very interesting to see now, how does Belal Muhammad handle the spotlight so bright on him for the first time? Jack Della Maddalena gets his first opportunity. This is a guy who it feels like he's been close for a little bit and has now been able to break through. And he is getting that chance against a guy who, again, is feeling this kind of a spotlight and this kind of a pressure for the first time. So it's an interesting opportunity for Jack Della Maddalena coming up this week, and he is deserving of it. He has won 17 in a row after an 0-2 start to his career. It's quite impressive. My one concern about this, and interested to kind of break it down as the week goes on, but Gilbert Burns and Kevin Holland are the last two wins for JDM. those guys aren't exactly at their peaks right now. And so, while I do think he has built up well, he has won a lot of fights to get to this opportunity. It does, I used this the last time, and maybe I'm just getting too used to it. It slightly feels like he has skipped a step here, but I still think those are big enough names that he is deserving of this opportunity and has kind of built up to it in an important way. I just don't know from a talent standpoint if he has necessarily done that. So we will see what type of a gap there is in what he has faced before and what he will be facing coming up on Saturday. In the co-main event, Valentina Shevchenko is looking to add to her Hall of Fame resume. This is the first time she's fighting someone not named Alexa Grasso since 2002. Now, both fighters are going to be on this card, but Grasso is hanging out at the start of the main card. I am interested to see the game plan and the implementation of this because there was an adjustment made by Valentina Shevchenko after a surprising loss in her first bout. And we never really had to see a plan B in that third fight because of what I considered a poor performance, I guess, would be the best way to put it, from Alexa Grasso. And so now, how does Shevchenko, we are going to be facing in Shevchenko, someone who probably does have a plan A, B, C, and D, and has seen all of the ways that she has failed before. It was kind of easy to counter it for Valentina on the last one. What does she have now for Fiorot? Again, if you just put up best fighter against best fighter, I think in both of these, the champions retain probably pretty easily. But I do think there's enough of a story going into it that you can create at least a little bit of doubt going into that. For Fiorot, she is also, like the title challenger in the main event, also coming off of a winning streak after losing the first fight of her career. So she starts with an offer and has now won everything since. And it felt like she wasn't really going to get the opportunity, but then she just kind of felt like she was beating everyone who the UFC was about to put in for an opportunity, so she gets this shot now. Coming off of a win over Erin Blanchfield, she's also beat Rose Namajunas and Caitlin Chukagian. She has basically knocked off every contender on her road to this opportunity. So this isn't a Della Maddalena where, the last couple weren't really whatever. You can say what you want about Rose, but there are a lot of high-quality wins for Fiorot now, against a bunch of different styles too. Now, none of them are as good as Valentina Shevchenko can be at her best, but we will see what is the best that Valentina Shevchenko has coming up this Saturday. So again, a lot to cover on this UFC 315 pay-per-view. This is where I think the show really does shine with our UFC pay-per-view coverage. We are going to look at, again, the fighters to watch coming up later on in the week. Going to look at the schedule ahead for the Ultimate Fighting Championship and do a full UFC 315 preview. So keep it locked here on Couch Potato Diary for a really fun fight week, which continues when we look at the Canadians on this card. For those of you who don't know, I am based out here in Canada, and so with that, want to look at the guys who are representing the True North strong and fierce in the Octagon this weekend, and with the fight being in Montreal, you get a lot of that. Bunch of Canadians on this card, so let's look at the Canadian spotlight heading into UFC 315 in Montreal. UFC 315 makes its way north of the border as Montreal plays host to another UFC pay-per-view. And that means a lot of Canadians on this card and a lot of Canadians in intriguing fights. So let's take a look at the Canadian spotlight. And we begin, we'll start at the bottom and work our way up. Brad Katana, bantamweight out of Winnipeg, is facing Beksat Almakan. Apologies if I said that wrong. This one, we got a couple Canadian fighters on here who are really in some important fights for them career-wise. Maybe not necessarily title-wise, but career-wise. Katona has lost 2 of his last 3, looking for a win here from the bantamweight out of Winnipeg to kind of get things back on track for him a little bit. So this is an important fight. It looks like it's going to be the one that kind of is the curtain jerker coming up this weekend. Big fight for him to get that one on track and just kind of see if we can start to graduate away from just being the Canadian who fights on the Canadian cards here and try to work our way up the rankings a little bit now. For Marc-Andre Barrio, the middleweight out of Gatineau, this feels like it's a fight for his job as he is taking on Bruno Silva, and it has a must-win for both guys and type of a feel. And really, it feels like a loser leaves town match to me. You have Silva, who's lost 6 of his last 7, taking on Barrio, who has lost 3 in a row and 4 of his last 6. He has been finished in 3 of the 4 and 2 of the 3, including a first-round knockout loss in Edmonton in November. So you have 2 guys who are struggling. if you lose to another struggling guy, I just don't know how long your employment lasts in the Ultimate Fighting Championship. And while the UFC does like to load up on guys from certain regions so that when they go there, they can have the local guy there are other Canadians that they could find. So this is a massive fight for Barrio to try to kind of keep that UFC paycheck coming in. Then we get to Jasmine Jastovicius, the number 9 flyweight in the world, fighting out of St. Catharines, Ontario. She'll be challenging Jessica Andrade. Jastovicius has won 4 in a row, including a big one in her last fight against Mayra Bueno Silva, which was the first female fight out in Saudi. She has a lot of talent and has put a very interesting run together. It is not always the most aesthetically pleasing, but she has put a very interesting run together and worked her way into the top 10 in the flyweight division. She is facing a beast in Jessica Andrade. And now, Andrade is not what she used to be. There is the starting of a fall off here, having lost 4 of her last 6, but she is always a scary human being to fight in that cage. And that is the thing. Jastovicius feels like she's going to have to be perfect for 15 minutes against Andrade, but I feel like she could be able to, as this could be one of the bigger names that she puts a W beside on her resume. Mike Malott will be facing Charles Radke. Brad Radke is a former pitcher for the Minnesota Twins, and it's weird that my brain went there because I haven't thought about Brad Radke in a really long time. But Charles Radke will be taking on Mike Malott, who was born in Burlington, Ontario. Malott coming off of a very late loss to Neil Magny. Pretty good response when the Ultimate Fighting Championship was up north from here in Edmonton back in November as he beats Trevin Giles by decision. It was the first decision win of Malott's career. Looking to build up some momentum, trying to get back into that spot. I think the Neil Magny loss was a real difficult one for him because a win there, and now you move into a different category in the welterweight division. And so now you have to start the trek back to where you were 18 months ago. That's a long road back for someone who's 33, 34 years old. We'll see what Malott can do here and how high he can kind of raise that bar in 2025. And then one Canadian on the main card. It's Eamon Zahabi out of Laval, Quebec, the number 14 ranked bantamweight in the UFC, and he is going up against a legend in Jose Aldo. Zahabi, obviously a fairly recognizable last name, has won 5 in a row after a 1-2 start to his UFC career. 3 of those by decision, 2 of them by knockout. And again, he is facing an absolute legend. So going to be interesting to see where the crowd goes. Is it with the guy from just down the road in Laval, or is it going to be with the legend who makes his way into the octagon one more time in Jose Aldo? But it would all be like, this is, while Aldo is not what he used to be, or even not a version of the thing that fell off from what he used to be, he is still a dangerous fighter, and he is still a very big name. So this is equal parts, I think, the toughest test for Zahabi, and also the easily biggest name of his career. And it is a chance now to work up into a conversation where now we're a couple fights away from being a fight away from a championship opportunity. So a very, very important fight for Eamon Zahabi coming up as we get ready for UFC 315 this weekend. That is going to do it for the Canadian Spotlight. Again, UFC Fight Week continues here on Couch Potato Diary on Wednesday when we look at the fighters to watch. That's going to do it for the stream. A long one today, coming up on a couple of hours. Thank you all so much for hanging out today. As always, we are presented by Sea of Dead. Check out seaofdead403.ca. If you missed any of this, check it out in podcast form, or all the videos are up on the YouTube channel and on Daily Motion. Again, if you're watching this live, thank you so much. If you're tuning in after the fact, you want to catch these early, we do them live on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays going forward. Mondays at noon, Wednesday and Thursday at 10 a.m. And again, it is available in podcast form wherever you get those podcasts. So if you're listening, make sure that you hit that subscribe button and leave a review or a rating. That stuff really helps out, and I would really appreciate it. If you are watching, share this video with your friends. Give it a like, give the channel a subscribe. And again, if you're just here for the fight stuff, we got the fight playlist. It's all broken down. You're just here for the hockey stuff. It's all in the playlist stuff. There's something for everything here on Couch Potato Diary. Thank you guys so much for hanging out today. The next stream is going to be tomorrow. We are going to be doing a video game stream. Hockey World's popping off. We're going to have the draft lottery tonight, so we'll probably be talking about that a little bit, and we'll probably mix some wrestling talk in there as well, but we will be playing the hockey video game going on tomorrow. That one will be, again, 10 a.m. start over on Twitch. So thank you guys so much for hanging out. I can't thank you enough. It's been fun doing these live on YouTube and as always on Twitch and Kick. Have a great rest of your day, everybody.